in Malaysia. I brought into KLDX, right, obviously a lot of my own experience, right, from the traditional world. So it's marrying, of the TradFi, right, into the blockchain world, right, and hopefully into DeFi in time to come, yeah. So it's good to know that many of the audience here are very familiar, right, with tokenization, right? So for those of you who are familiar, you would notice that it is actually disrupting traditional finance, but it's doing that in a very, very positive way. So since most of you here are from banks, right, you will notice that a lot of the major banks actually, have made moves into this whole area of tokenization. So Morgan Stanley, for example, right, they back tokenization through an investment in a US-based company called Securitize. Goldman Sachs launched its own tokenization platform, and close to our home, DBS actually, has established, its own tokenization platform that is known as DBS Digital. They've also actually issued a bond actually on that platform, right? So the Singapore government obviously has been very, very active in the space, right, in the region, right? So you see a lot of, activities in Singapore, right? Um, and if you look at what is the projection like for the tokenized market, BCG puts it at 16 trillion, right, by the year 2020. You'll also notice the large asset managers, such as BlackRock, KKR, Hamilton Lane, all of them have actually gone into tokenization, tokenized funds, right, and are continuing to tokenize. So you wonder, right, why is it like someone like BlackRock, for example, right, does tokenization, yeah? And the reason for them to do it is because they want to reach out to new classes of investors. So as I mentioned just now, right, there's a generational shift also that's taking place, and a lot of younger, wealthier investors are out there as well. So they want to be able to tap onto this new segment and continue to grow as well. Yeah. So what are the factors that is driving tokenization globally, right? One is, of course, increasingly regulators are coming out with regulatory framework. In order for tokenization, to gain a strong foothold and grow, right, a market like Vietnam, you will definitely need to have clarity on the regulatory framework. So how have regulators world over approached this, right? What they've actually done is that they have, in a way, retrofitted, right, the traditional finance into this tokenization world. That means if you're going to tokenize something, right, let's say you want to tokenize a bond, in the first place, you must comply with all of the regulatory requirements that is currently applicable to bonds, right? So if you want to do equity, you apply with all the current requirements for an equity. So if you want to do a fund, you apply all the current requirements. So in that way, the regulator does not have to come up with a whole set of requirements. Yeah. So this is the approach that has been taken in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in Malaysia, right? Because it doesn't make sense, right, to have two different sets of rules, right? One for tokenized, another for non-tokenized. So the thing to remember is tokenization is nothing more than a digital representation of an underlying asset on blockchain. Okay, so it's just a digital representation. Today you buy things in the stock market, it's all digital, correct? So similarly here, right, it's digital, it's called token because it's on blockchain, right? But of course, the blockchain itself brings a lot of benefits that you had heard from the panel before. So that is the difference. So this underlying securities laws will not change. So if you're going to issue a bond or a fund, right, it'll all remain the same. So that's where, right. So for the banks here, right, when you want to do products, right, you will continue to comply with the similar underlying requirements that is required to issue a bond or a fund. It's just that it's being delivered in a different manner, right, that enables a lot of efficiency to come about, some of which I'll talk about shortly. Yeah. So in Malaysia, right, what's happening is that our securities regulator, that is Securities Commission, as well as the central bank, Bank Negara, right, are both giving a strong push to tokenization as well as digital assets. So as a result of which, of course, today, right, a lot more banks, a lot more asset managers are taking an interest. So banks obviously will be very sensitive to the queue from the central bank. So similarly in Vietnam, right, unless the central bank actually provides the queue, right, and sends out that very clear guidance, typically you'll find that banks will not on their own, right, go and undertake this sort of adoption, because they all have got licenses and they need to comply with their license requirements. So in Malaysia, what's happening is that the regulator is giving the strong push, and you see the same thing in Singapore as well as in Hong Kong. So in this respect, I want to touch on this whole area of private markets, right? Because that's where, in the traditional financial world, right, tokenization is being used, right? So what you find globally is that private markets have been actually growing very, very significantly, right? So they call that the newest, the new shiniest thing, right? In the world of investment today. So a lot of funds, right? A lot of investors are chasing after good deals, right, in in private markets. So just an introduction to KLDX. I'm not sure why it's mangled there a bit. Sorry about that, right? But we are a multi-asset private markets platform, right? We onboard both investors as well as issuers, and we actually match them, right? Now, as I mentioned earlier, right, and as the panelists also mentioned, when you want to do this, right, you must have a problem statement. So our problem statement lie in the fact that there's a huge funding gap. I think even in Thailand, you have a very huge funding gap for the SMEs. Yeah. So that's where platforms like this, right, can actually address the funding needs. So when a lot of the mid-tier companies, etc., right, do find challenges. So that's where things like PE, VC, and all are in there, but it's simply not enough in Malaysia. So that's where we saw the opportunity, right, to bring in a platform like KLDX to address the funding gap. Now, interestingly, in Malaysia, we have 2.7 trillion cash that is sitting in the banking and in the bank accounts, right? Actually, Malaysian banks do pay quite a high deposit, right? It's about, for individuals, it's 3%. So it's quite high, yeah. So a lot of them actually keep their money in the banks, and so this is where, right, private markets can come in and tap onto that liquidity that's there. Now we are a one-stop center, so when you develop a platform of this nature, right, it cannot be exactly like your traditional platform. You must overcome some of the issues, some of the problems that you have faced, right, or your customers have faced. So that's where, right, we looked at what are all the problems that people face, right, and we come up with a one-stop center. So if you want to raise funds, you just come to the platform, everything gets done there, right? The origination, the distribution, as well as the asset servicing. So we do everything, right? So it's efficient then, for the company, and it's also lower cost. Now, a lot of companies don't have reach to investors, yeah? But when you come onto a platform, you have a broader reach. So for Vietnam companies, right, you may be attractive to your domestic market, you may also be attractive to your international market. Not everyone can go onto the Hanoi or the Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange, right? So then that's where you can go onto a platform, right, and you can have that broader reach. And this also, of course, enables a company, right, to build a pipeline, right, towards its own exchanges. And for investors, of course, they can then participate, in these asset classes and also have liquidity. Now, as you are aware, right, I mean, private markets tend to outperform the public markets, so there's huge opportunity there. Yeah. So this slide actually shows, right, KLDX and how comprehensive we are, maybe in comparison to an investment bank right at the end. So you can just take a look at your both left and right, and you can see that we are fairly comprehensive, right, that we've got many different licenses and we can do the entire value chain, right. So one thing that, investment banks may not have really is a secondary market capability. So even when you buy bonds in the market today, everything is dealt with OTC, right, whereas here, it is listed and there's actually actual price discovery that takes place, yeah. So we've got the primary market, right? So a platform can have primary. This is where the origination, similar to IPO, that takes place, right? Then it gets custodized and then it gets listed for secondary trading. Yeah, so if you like, right, it's very similar to your stock exchange. It's just that this is, if you like, a platform that caters for the smaller private market assets. And depending on the regulation, right, in Malaysia, we allow a broad range of investors. So you can't see the words there, but it's actually retail, angel, high net worth institution. So we can deal with a broad range of asset classes. Yeah. We welcome foreigners to open an account as well. So if you want to experience a platform, you can actually go on to our web and actually open an account. It's under 10 minutes, right? All you need is your passport to open accounts. You can also buy products on our platform. Now, so this is the team, right? Our team actually comes largely, almost everyone there comes from the capital markets. So we're very strong in capital markets. Why? Because, see, when you assemble a team, you must be very clear what you want to do. So we were very clear what we want to deal with is traditional finance, tokenizing traditional financial documents, right? Such as bonds, sukuk, equity and all that. So that's why our team actually comprises of people from the capital markets in themselves. Yeah. So we've got more than 100 years of experience there. So the team is absolutely important. If you are going to succeed, you need to bring in a broad range of, players, right, into the team, and a supportive board. So this is actually, right, Malaysia's funding landscape, like, if you like. And I think it may be similar for many markets, right? So when you look at it, right, okay, so what we found, I call it the value of death, right? Because in Malaysia, what we find is that 10 to 50 million is where a lot of companies fall off. They cannot raise that funding, 10 to 50 million. When they're looking to scale up, then they either stagnate or they die, right? So that's the space, the mid space where we operate in. So every market will have its gap. So in Vietnam, for example, you must see where is the gap, where is the funding gap, right? And then you come and address that particular funding gap. So we've successfully launched the world's first, tokenized Sharia-compliant fixed income. So many of you may be aware of Malaysia's expertise when it comes to Sharia, right? So we are the largest and the leading jurisdiction for sukuk in the world, right? So we have, actually we've got the largest bond market in Southeast Asia, as well as unit trust market in Southeast Asia, right? And so, of course, we have got natural, advantages when it comes to sukuk, any kind of Sharia. So whilst the platform is not completely Sharia focused, we have the ability, right, to bring Sharia products. So we are very attractive to many Sharia markets. So we were featured in the Global Islamic FinTech Report, for example, right, as democratizing access. So we do have a lot of interest coming from, let's say, the Middle East, etc., right? They're very keen on our platform, right? So this is actually a 150 million program over a period of 7 years. So to date, we've actually raised about 50 million for them. We're helping them actually with the establishment of rehabilitation centers. So they've built three rehabilitation centers. They're looking at building a total of 5 rehabilitation centers, right? So it's similar to a bond, right? But for smaller companies in Malaysia, you can issue what is known as an investment note, right, which is less complex, lower cost compared to bonds. And we had, interestingly, right, we had both institutional as well as individual investors participating in that, right? So we have done a total of 7 issuance of that, and we have also done the asset servicing. So on the platform, we also do the distribution of the coupon. We do the redemption. We also do any kind of communication to investors. Yeah, so it's a one-stop center. So the next product that we are bringing is actually a book retailer, right? They are very interesting model, right, where they actually operate in the remainder book industry, and where they do actually exhibitions, and that's the main way in which their revenue model is being derived. So 50% of the income comes from Malaysia, another 50 comes from the ASEAN region, right? Incidentally, they say they want to come into Vietnam, right? But the censorship is very strong. So, to date, they've not been able to come, right? But they are very big in Indonesia, in Thailand, in the Philippines. They sell books at 50 to 80% discount to the price that you find in bookshops. Their mission is actually really to bring English literacy to the world, right? So they typically, work in, markets which are developing, yeah? So that's the issuer profile that we have, right? We have got about 650 million, right, ringgit worth of order book there, right, which we intend to bring to market. We will be actually bringing our first tokenized bond sometime in September, October this year, right? So this slide depicts our evolution, where we started in 2023. You will have to go through a lot of investor education in a market and market education. So when we first started, right, a lot of people were not aware what is tokenization, and they often confuse that with crypto assets. Of course, when FTX occurred, right, there was a lot of aversion, right? Anything that was blockchain was bad. But of course, then people soon realized that there's a difference between technology and a product and an exchange. So there's a lot of investor education that needs to take place. So that's the evolution that we went through. And these are all the different asset classes. So if you're looking at what are the different asset classes, right, that you can bring in, right? It's equity, right? It's bonds, sukuk, private funds, commodities, real estate. So there's a broad range of asset classes that can actually be brought. We're also working on some real estate tokenization, right? Especially in markets where not everybody can afford to own real estate. I think there's a good use case for real estate tokenization, where you can own a small part, right, of a real estate and still benefit, right, from the capital appreciation and the returns that comes along with owning. You can also have, rent to own concepts. So a lot of things that you can do, right, when it comes to property and tokenization. Now, I think there was a discussion as well on ecosystem. So it's very, very important. You cannot do everything on your own. So if you're going to succeed as a platform, you've got to build the ecosystem. So you've got to work with a broad range of people, right? So it depends, right, on what you're seeking to do, and you will then accordingly build your ecosystem. We built our ecosystem. Obviously, it's a very, very time-consuming process, and you need a lot of tenacity, right, and energy. And for banks, obviously, right, it's got to be driven from the top, and there's got to be a lot of support internally. Otherwise, you'll give up halfway. Yeah. We actually have a collaboration with other exchanges as well, right? So because we are scaling up regionally, the whole idea is to actually have at some point, right, a connection between all of the different platforms in the ASEAN region, right? So that we can perhaps one day in the distant future have a single board, right, of the different products that is coming from the ASEAN region. I don't think it's utopian. I think that is really achievable if because today technology is enabling it. When I was in the stock exchange, we tried to do that, but the technology cost was simply too high for the ASEAN markets to do that, right? Whereas what I find is that with blockchain, right, and perhaps also with the use of stablecoin, all this is actually a real possibility. Yeah. Yeah. So these are the regional opportunities. We are currently looking at the GCC region, as I mentioned, right? Okay, so we also have a strong focus on green, right? We can enable green, and that's where, right, with your green bond and all that, there's great opportunity to use blockchain as a smart contract, right, to actually automate a lot of the governance and compliance requirements, that comes along with having green products. Yeah. So that's it. I've come to the end of my presentation.